It was exhilarating. It was exhilarating. It was energizing. And if they weren't exhilarated by this challenge to the monopoly of violence, by this shifting of the balance of power, then they would not be human. I was exhilarated.
I think that we should all give an applaud right now to Hamas for a job well done. When they woke up in the morning and they found the field hands in the house with a knife ready to cut their fucking throats. I was late to the news, but when I heard it, I said, I don't want to hear that bullshit. 250 innocent Israelis are dead. Fuck them! Again, I swear, I salute Hamas. A job well done.
I wonder how many opposed what happened when the prison gates of Gaza were burst open, and how many of them reacted just like Black people in the South reacted to Nat Turner, even though it was well known that the order Nat Turner gave out was, quote, kill all the whites, which is what they proceeded to do. And again, I want to say that the more I hear about this Saturday, and I think that many details I verified many details, and the atrocities were there. But it taught me that people came, not all, not the majority, a few, but it only tells me how the pressure that has built up, how monstrous the pressure was to create those monstrous attacks in one day.
And this is someone who described it as an orgy of violence.
Yes, orgies of vengeance. At least that's what I have here, orgies of vengeance. Which it was. When I read the chapter in the biography where it described what they did, there's a long chapter, I told you, Nat Turner and his supporters. It was an orgy of vengeance. It was an orgy of vengeance, which I think was true. It was born of that chasm between who they were, who they aspired to be, and this hapless fate of being born into slavery or born into a concentration camp. If that sounds like, the French expression, to understand is to excuse. If that sounds like excusing, well, guess what? Excuse me, but I think it's the truth.
What did I tell you guys? What have I been telling you guys about Turkey and Israel? I've been telling you guys that eventually the Turks will exterminate the Jews. There will be another Holocaust of the Jews. Guys, it is so obvious to me that there will be another Holocaust of the Jews. It's so obvious to me. There's going to be another Holocaust. The hatred to the Jews has become almost acceptable. And I'm not talking about just in the United States, but just worldwide. Hatred to the Jews is becoming more and more common and more accepted. It has become immensely tolerated. Why? Well, I'm sure there's multiple reasons why, but I think there's been this growing trend I've noticed lately where you have people on the internet that present themselves as they present themselves in a way such as, I am a civilizationist. I'm a Christian civilizationalist. I've seen that before. And anytime I see someone calling themselves something like Christian civilizationalist, I always just say, okay, a Nazi in Catholic garb. And you'll see these people, they're, Catholic and they're trad and they hate the Jews. I mean, they hate them. And they don't care if Palestinians butcher Jewish people, slit Jewish people's throats. They will make an excuse for it. They'll say, well, the Jews are this and that, and the Talmud says that you can kill Goyim, so all the Jews are evil, and that's the reason why. That's the reason why, and it's okay to hate Jews. And I was looking at videos, for example, of Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, lately, he's been going through just a lot of debates. He's been debating people, it seems like every day. He's debating at least one person who is pro-Palestine. And he must be just utterly exhausted from it, because it is very exhausting to debate people, to argue with people, especially people who are very unreasonable. And he's been debating these people about the Palestinian war, and these people cannot condemn the Palestinians. Or if they do condemn the Palestinians, they only do it for a split second to then switch the topic to bashing Israel and bashing the Israelis and making the Israelis look evil. And it really, there's multiple things that I want to say about this whole thing. And this is not entirely for me reading things. This is mainly for me just observing certain things and then thinking upon these certain things. And, the mind has this amazing way of making observations and then deducing conclusions and really putting the pieces together, connecting the dots, and trying to see the general picture of things. There's this weird phenomena. There is this weird phenomena taking place, and I'm trying my best to put everything together. I'm trying my best to arrange my thoughts well so that you guys can understand what I'm trying to say. In the right-wing side of things and in the left-wing side of things, you have this hatred towards the Jew. I'm not saying... And by right-wing, I don't mean like your average Newt Gingrich conservative who reads Bill O'Reilly's books, his ghost-written books. And by left, I'm not talking about some liberal guy who likes John Kerry. Okay, I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people who are leftists, so people who, I guess you could call them tankies, people who are far left, who are excessive. Ted, do you mean those who call everything based? Yes, exactly. You have it right. You're correct about the Ottoman Turks in the fall of Constantinople. There's a documentary that talks, it's called The Rise of the Ottomans. Very interesting. It's on Netflix. Okay, very interesting. So you have this. So you have this phenomena in the right wing and in the left wing of hatred to the Jews. It is amazing to see, because is the internet acting up again? I hope it's not acting up again. Okay, I'm not noticing the internet acting up. Anyway, it is amazing to see, because for so many decades we've been talking about the Nazis, and we've been talking about the Holocaust and all that stuff, and it's almost like none of that even matters anymore, right? It's almost like Schindler's List and all the books on the Holocaust that have been written, and all the documentaries on History Channel about the Holocaust, and all the articles on Time Magazine, National Geographic about the Holocaust. It's almost like all of these things just don't matter anymore. Like, people just don't give a shit. That's the impression that I'm getting. It's either people don't care, or people have this explicit hatred to the Jews. This is what I'm seeing. And in the right-wing side of things, you have people who, like Morgan here said, you have people who call everything based, and they say, well, Jews control the world, or they manipulate the currency, and George Soros runs everything, so therefore Palestinians are the good guys. And they may point to things that are true. And that's what makes them so dangerous, is that they may point things that are true. They may say, well, in the Talmud or in certain old religious Jewish texts, it says you can kill non-Jews or you can kill Christians, and so the Jews are evil. And they never really want to actually seriously look at what they're saying, right? They never really want to actually seriously look at what they're saying and show that every single Jew believes this. They don't want to do that because it would make their worldview just fall flat. Because if you go to Israel, you're going to find people who are just like anybody else. You're going to find people who are evil, vicious, hate-filled, racist, hardcore Zionist lunatics. Yes, absolutely. You're going to find a lot of those people. But not everyone in Israel is that way. Not every Jew wants to kill non-Jews. Just like not every Muslim wants to kill non-Muslims. Not every Muslim wants to kill Jews. Not every Muslim wants to kill Christians. And but nonetheless, you have these mentalities, and you see a lot of this in Twitter, right? Which Twitter is just a leviathan of just pure hatred. It's just pure, like, there's so much hatred in Twitter. It's just a steaming pile of bitterness and unsatiable hatred. Insatiable. Is that the correct way to say that word? Insatiable? Just insatiable. Unquenchable hatred. That's what it is, Twitter. It's just a labyrinth of evil. Anyway, they'll say, yeah, well, this rabbi says you can kill non-believers or whatever, so yeah, F the Jews. And they'll start supporting the Palestinians. One thing I've noticed also, and this is something that actually really bothers me. I'm not gonna lie, and I was thinking about this since this morning, as I was watering my plants. I was thinking about this stuff. I listen. I know people who are very pro-Russia, and they are pro-Russia to the extent that it's almost like Russia can do no wrong. And they support Bashar al-Assad, and they love Russia and all that stuff, and they probably, I don't know, watch RT or something like that. But when when the Russian war began last year, anytime there was a report of Russia killing civilians or Russia bombing a church in Ukraine, they were like, well, they would either say things like, well, this is probably made up, or maybe Azov fighters were in that area, so Russia had no choice but to bomb it, and sadly civilians died. That's just the nature of war, and Ukraine was the one who started this, so they are the reason why this chaos is happening. It's not really Russia's fault, it's NATO's fault, because NATO was putting Russia into a corner by not respecting Russia's sphere of influence, and so this is all NATO and Russia. This is all NATO and Ukraine's fault. And yes, civilians are being killed by Russia, but that's just the nature of war. So who cares, right? That's pretty much the pro-Russia perspective on things. It's just war, and that's it. I just accept it. I don't like it, but I just accept it, right? That's what a lot of these people online who are pro-Russia say. Same thing with Bashar al-Assad. They'll say, well, Bashar al-Assad is fighting terrorists, and yes, Bashar al-Assad, had in his war on the rebel fighters, he bombed areas where there were rebels, and the rebels were in civilian infrastructure, so sadly civilians died, but that's not the intention of Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad is still a good guy who's trying to protect his people. It's just that this is war, and it's just the dark, grim truth of war. Okay, whatever, that's your position. But Israel bombs Gaza after over 1,000 of its citizens were butchered like cattle, and Israel is condemned by the very people who make arguments for Russia or make arguments for Syria. And this is just so bloody. It's just so annoying, guys. It's so aggravating. If you are going to justify Russia bombing civilians, or not bombing, like intentionally bombing civilians, but bombing areas where there are civilians in its war on Azov, or if you're going to justify Bashar al-Assad bombing areas where there are civilians in his war on the rebels, the NATO-backed, NATO-armed rebels that you hate so much, I mean, you can't sit there and not extend the same hand of charity to Israel. It's like, look at what Israel's doing. Israel did this, and Israel bombed this, and Israel did this. And it's like, dude, your buddy Putin was doing the same shit. Assad was doing the same damn thing. But Israel does it, and it's bad. You know why? Because these people just hate Israel. They have a hatred to Jews for whatever reason. You know, they think the Jews run the world. They think the Jews are like running the economy. They think that Jews are the reasons why they're losers. They think that Jews are the reason why they don't have a girlfriend or something. I don't know what it is, but there's multiple reasons why people hate Jews. And Israel, no matter what Israel does, Israel's evil. And so Palestinians, Gazans, go into Israel, and they, just making sure my mic is working here, they kill a whole bunch of people. They launched thousands of rockets into Israel. They killed people by going into their homes, burning them alive, beheading them, just butchering people. And they just say, these people on the left will say, well, that's what you get for occupying these people. And there are a lot of there's a lot of BLM types out there. A lot of BLM types, you know. Can you guys hear me? Are we good? Up. Okay. There's a lot of BLM types that will also justify what the Palestinians did. I've seen 2 videos so far. One video was and I found it on Instagram. Let's see if I can find it. Some guy, some black guy, was saying things like, oh, these Palestinians, man, they slit them Jews' throats. All I gotta do is congratulate them. Those Palestinians glided over into the occupiers' land, into the occupiers, and they went into their towns. They glided in there, and all I gotta say is good work, good work. And people were just clapping their hands. People were clapping their hands and whistling and praising this guy like they were in a Sunday sermon. Like they were in a Sunday sermon. What the hell is happening? You're talking about terrorists who sympathize with Hitler. Yes, they do. They sympathize with Hitler. They murder people because they're Jews. And you would think, oh my God, this is a hate crime. This is an atrocity. This is an anti-Semitic massacre. But you have people clapping their hands, and these people are on the left and they're on the right. What's happening, everybody? What's happening is that the world is turning against Jews. That's what's happening. And this is why I say that there is no doubt in my mind that another Holocaust will happen. It is inevitable at this point. It's inevitable. If a right-wing terrorist went into a synagogue and shot a bunch of people up, these people who are praising Hamas would not be praising that because, well, they can't praise a Nazi or someone who's an open Nazi. They can't praise someone who's an open Nazi. But if a Muslim does it, they praise it. So do they really love Jews? Are they really against Nazism? Or are they only against a particular image that conveys a certain narrative? In other words, do they really hate Nazism? Or do they just hate people who aren't on their team? Because the so-called far right is not on their team. But the Palestinian guy, well, Palestinian, they are considered to be non-white people, and they are occupied by a people who are considered imperialist. So the people on the left will sympathize with the Palestinians. They'll say, well, they're not Nazis. Well, they kill Jews because they hate Jews, but they're not white Jew haters. They're dark-skinned or tanned-skinned olive-skinned Jew haters. So that's okay. Olive-skinned Jew haters, that's fine. So it's not that they really hate Nazism. They just don't like people who are not on their little football team, their political sport team. And the same thing goes for people on the right. They will also sympathize with the Palestinians. Why? Because, well, the Palestinians are killing Jews, and they're against the Jews. No, it's because Israel occupies them, and Israel invaded their land. Well, you know what? If that's the case, then you should sympathize with the Native Americans. You should sympathize with the Ukrainians also. You should be sympathizing with the Tibetans. And I don't see these people talking about Tibet. Free Tibet! I don't see these people talking about Tibet, but I see them talking a whole lot about Jews because it's their opportunity. And another thing that I want to mention is the future of this all. What is going to be the denouement? What is going to be the outcome of this all? Well, like I said, there's going to be another Holocaust. It's going to happen, everybody. You see the demonstrations that are pro-Palestine. They're a lot bigger than the ones who are pro-Israel. Look at the pro-Palestine demonstration that took place in Greece. Huge crowd. Look at the pro-Palestine demonstration that took place in Ireland. Huge crowd. Huge crowd. Goose Hunter brings up a good point. He says they were clapping their hands like Canadian MPs for 98-year-old SS Galician Ukrainian veteran. Very interesting point. Now, here's another dot. Thanks to Goose Hunter, I have yet another dot to connect in this whole labyrinth. So, I remember when the war in Ukraine first began last year, and I did a video and I said, one thing that this war is doing is it is revealing people. It's exposing people. It's exposing people. That's what I said. Because you have people who are considered liberal saying, Azov isn't that bad. Now, these are the very people who would be extremely concerned, or they would express some very strong consternation at a headline saying that a neo-Nazi just murdered people. They would say, oh my goodness, Nazism, evil. And they would be right? It's obviously evil, blatantly evil. A man in Buffalo walks into a grocery store and kills black folk. Blatantly evil. A man in El Paso, back in, in 2020 or 2021? Man in El Paso goes into a Walmart and murders 22 people because he hated Mexicans. Blatantly evil. And these people would go online and say, look, Nazism, look, the far right, bad, far right, bad. And I would agree with them. I'll be right up there with them saying absolutely. You guys know my feelings on this. I've been talking about the dangers of the far right for many years now. But then Russia invades Ukraine, and all of a sudden Azov Battalion are the good guys. Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis are the good guys. So it's not really that Jew hatred is considered to be tolerable because Palestinians are doing it. I mean, that's one aspect of it all. But we have actually seen explicit, blatant sympathy to an actual far-right neo-Nazi organization like Azov. Why? Because the Nazis are fighting the Russians. And we've seen people on the right-wing side and the left-wing side sympathize with Azov. Well, they're Nazis. They've murdered civilians. They're evil. They love Hitler. They love Bandera. They love Melnik, and they love Shukhevich, and they love all these monsters. Well, that doesn't matter because they're fighting the Russians. Fast forward to what we're seeing now. Well, the Palestinians, they broke into people's homes. They killed babies. They beheaded people. They burned people alive. They raped. They beheaded. They slit throats. They shot people. They executed people. They bombed people. Well, that doesn't matter because they're Palestinians who are doing the killing. The Palestinians are the good guys, and those evil Zionists are the bad guys. So the narrative determines the ethics or the morality of the situation. Or maybe I can put it better than that. One's football team, one's political football team, so to speak, determines whether or not one thinks their actions are wrong or good. So if your political football team is committing the massacre and the ones who are being massacred are people that you don't like, well, that political football team, they're justified. So you sympathize with the Palestinians, you hate the Zionists, Palestinians kill the Israelis. All Israelis are occupiers in the warped minds of these people. Therefore, Palestinians are the good guys. But hold on. Isn't there Hitler sympathy amongst the Palestinians? Is there not Hitler sympathy amongst the Turks? Is there not... did these people not just kill Jews because they hate Jews? Isn't that pretty much just Nazism? But instead of Nazism, it's Islamism? Yeah, but who cares? Because who cares about those Jews? Palestinians are the good guys. Same thing with the Russian war. Wait a second. Azov are neo-Nazis, far right, the very types of people who would have shot up a grocery store to kill black folk or to kill Mexicans. Yeah, but that doesn't matter because they're killing Russians. So the morality of a situation is determined by who is being killed and or who is doing the killing. All right, depending on who you talk to. You have people who obviously sympathize with Nazism, so they love Azov. You have people who really hate Russians. And it's not like they're, Sieg Heiling and goose-stepping in their bedroom. But because the Nazis are killing Russians, those Nazis are the good guys. So everything is situational, right? It's situational morality. It's situational morality. Everything is situational. Well, those Jews, they were... Listen, you hear a story about an elderly couple hiding in their safe room in Israel. Palestinians, Gazans, Hamas terrorists, they can't break through the door because it's a security room. It's built to be a fortification. And the Muslim terrorists decide just to put tires around the house, light the tires on fire, and cook those people alive. We can say, oh, that's evil. Well, hold on a second now. What about the occupation? And I was talking about this with my dad. I was talking about this with my dad last night, and he made a really good point. He said that the root problem of all this contention is people choosing a side. That is the root of it all. It's people choosing a side. If Israel does something that is egregious, and believe me, Israelis have their own share of crimes that they have committed. If Israelis, I should put it in a better way, if Israelis committed crimes, those crimes need to be exposed. Those crimes need to be pointed out and condemned. And Israel, or those Israelis, must be held to account. If Muslims do something that is evil, then those Muslims need to be exposed and condemned. But the problem is that you have people who choose the side that they like. They choose their football team. And because they have chosen a side, no matter what that side does, they have to justify it. And what ends up happening is dishonesty. The consequence or the result of all of this, the outcome of this way of thinking, which is how almost everybody thinks, is dishonesty. Because then you have to be dishonest. You have to be dishonest to justify something egregious. You have to be. To justify something as egregious as a massacre, you have to be dishonest. You have to deny that it happened. You have to say, well, no, that didn't happen. When it did happen, you have to say, well, it's actually not that bad. You have to blur the lines and be dishonest and confuse people and deceive people. You have to be deceptive. Holocaust deniers do this. Armenian genocide deniers do this sort of thing. They are people who love Russia to a fault. Yes, those people exist. I'm not naive. I'm not oblivious to this reality. And what ends up happening is that they will justify They'll try to justify Russia 100% all the time. They are people who are extremely pro-Israel to a fault, and to the point where it becomes extremely annoying. And they'll try to justify everything. And I've talked about crimes that Israelis have done. People act like I don't, but I have. You can go back in my articles. You can go back to my older videos from years ago, where I talked about, for example, the crime of Sabra and Shatila. Sabra and Shatila, one of the most horrendous things I've ever read about, and one of the most horrendous things that one can read about. Sabra and Shatila was a crime that took place in the 1980s, in which you had Nazi, fascist, ultra-nationalist Lebanese phalangist, and these people were, Catholics. These weren't Muslims, Lebanese Catholics, who were, I guess you could say, based trads, hardcore nationalists, and they were backed by Israel. Israel backed them because they were the main enemy of the PLO at the time in the Lebanese Civil War. And the Israelis knew that the Maronite fascists wanted to commit an atrocity. And so what happened was the PLO, which was the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was the main force for the Palestinians, the PLO made a peace deal with the Maronites, with the Phalangists. And part of the peace agreement was that the PLO would leave the refugee camps in Lebanon, and that the Maronites would not harm civilians. The Maronites, the Phalangists, I should say, made that agreement, and then they broke that agreement. When the PLO left, the people in the refugee camps had literally zero defense. And the Maronites decided, well, these people have no guns. Why not have a little bit of fun? And their idea of fun was to rape and slaughter. That was their idea of fun. So for 3 days, they raped and they slaughtered the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila. I don't give a shit what the PLO did. I don't give a shit what you think about Palestinians or how bad the religion of Islam is. That shit is not that shit is not justified. You can't justify that shit. And Israel watched it all happen. They had IDF soldiers around the entire refugee camps, the entirety of the refugee camps, and those IDF soldiers knew exactly what was happening, and they were there just to make sure that things went along accordingly. And the Israelis were watching it. Israeli intelligence knew about it. The Israeli government knew about it. And they just said, let those phalangists have their way. Let them do what they want. The Israelis wanted the massacre to happen because I think they just saw it as a big blow to the Palestinians. And there was an IDF officer who knew what was happening, and he went into one of the refugee camps, and he actually saved the family because he just hated what was happening. He hated what was happening. And I think there was an Israeli soldier who was in tears because of it. I mean, they knew exactly what was going on, and not all of the Israeli soldiers were so cold-blooded to the point where they didn't care. I mean, they really were heartbroken by what was happening. So Israel has done some pretty messed up stuff. I talked about Sabra and Shatila many times on my website. I have written on it. I wrote a whole short story on it. I've written a lot of articles on the topic, and I've done videos on it. You can just go on my YouTube channel and look up Sabra and Shatila. You'll find it. So I'm not oblivious to any of this stuff. When I read about Sabra and Shatila, and when I read about how people were murdered in front of their families, and it was just so horrific. When I read about a Palestinian guy who went to the hospital because of his injuries, and he didn't know what happened to his son, only to then later on read in the newspaper about the death of his son and how he broke down and became a broken man because of it. I mean, that's just something I can't stand for. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, it's fine because they're Palestinians. Like, that's bullshit. So I am someone who tries his best to point out evils, be they by Israelis or by Palestinians. And if you choose, let's say you choose the side of Israel, right, and you're like a hardcore Israel fan, that's your football team in this battle. You will say, well, maybe they had it coming, or maybe that didn't happen, maybe it was exaggerated, and so you have to become dishonest. The thing is that the whole nation of Israel knew about what happened in Sabra and Shatila, and 1 million Israelis took to the streets in the largest demonstration in Israel's history. Even to this day, there hasn't been a demonstration as large as the one that Israelis organized to condemn the Israeli government for what it did against Palestinians in Lebanon. And this is what I hate. This is what I absolutely hate about the pro-Palestine crowd, is they can never give and take. They can never just say, hey, this is wrong, and this other thing is also wrong. Do you see what I'm saying? They can't do that. They just have to say Israel wrong, Israel wrong, Israel wrong, Israel wrong. Israelis are occupiers. All Israelis are occupiers. There are no civilians. They are no civilians. They are no civilians. They're all occupiers, all occupiers. And it is complete, utter insanity. Complete and utter insanity. You should say Sabra and Shatila, bad. What happened on October the 7th? Bad. Evil. But you have people who are on the pro-Palestine side, and they're asked, do you condemn what happened on October the 7th? Do you condemn the massacre of 1,400 Israeli civilians? Let's talk about occupation. And this is becoming more and more mainstream. Every year I see it. It becomes more and more mainstream. This whole thing becomes more and more mainstream, this way of thinking. And that's why I say it, and I've said this many times, eventually there's going to be another Holocaust of the Jews. What happened on October 7th is just a sample of what is to come. It's a sample of what is to come, and it saddens me to say it, but it's true.